So I've had this idea kicking around in the back of my head to build a table for to sell, a steampunk table. And unfortunately, all of this wood, my tarps gave out. It's been sitting here for a couple years. But as bad as this may look, once I put it on the planer, I think some of it I ought to be able to salvage. Maybe not this one here, but I don't know. We'll see how it works out, playing them down, and I'll show you what happens on this project. I've made a little mock-up here, and this is to scale. So what I'll have is 27 inches in here, and then this corner will be 33 inches, and the outside will be 54 inches. So that's a pretty substantial piece of glass in the center, and plywood on the bottom, and then gears turning in the middle. It'll be pretty cool. And then I'm going to cut cogs, big gear cogs on the outside edge. I just wanted to kind of get a scope of measurement, see where I was at. Well, here I am the next day, cutting more boards. They're pretty rotten. Some of them are rotten a little bit. I might be able to get past the wetness. It's really such a shame that my tarps wore out and this stuff got wet. But I'm able to salvage some of it. And the stuff I'm putting over in the burn pile there. Okay, onward and sideways. Most of this stuff is really trashed. I got two pieces that I might be able to plane down, but the rest of it's going to be some long burning firewood, that's for sure. Well, I filled 2 bags full, and now I got about about 6 inches in that one, just from planing these boards. A couple of them are still wet, but I really don't want to delay building this thing, or at least seeing if it'll work. Just cleaning up right now. I put all that sawdust in the, I'll show you. Here it is in the compost bin. So right there it is. Hopefully it'll rain and that'll soak in a little bit, and I'll spin it around when the stuff underneath gets a little bit decomposed. I had a real issue with trying to cut these boards straight down on the table saw. So what I did is I just lowered the blade, because the blade was warping. It's hardwood, and it just, even with a 220 saw, it was having a hard time. So I lowered the blade to half. I have a little bit of a ridge in here from where the two sides met, because I flipped it over, and but I think it's closer. I cut these so I'd have a hexagon, a 6-sided table, and they're cut at 30 degrees. The way you do that is you take 360 degrees, divide it by the amount of parts, 6, that comes out to 60, and then you divide that in half, which is half of the miter, so that's 30 degrees. So that's how you figure that out. But anyway, I cut these two, and they weren't exactly, you know, I had like some kind of funky edge on them, so I just cut every one of them again, and I'm going to recut these miters, I think, because now I have an absolute flat surface on both sides that are equal. I should have done that first, but that's the way it works out. I thought one of them would be too short and not in good enough shape. It's got a big knot hole in it, but I'll fill that knot hole. And because I was going to do a 5-sided, but I sure didn't like the look of it. So I wanted to keep the numbers even, because I'm going to turn it into a big gear. So anyway, that's it for now. I'm going to keep plugging away at this thing. Well, here it is. My cuts are less than perfect. It really ticks me off. The blades are just wandering. This stuff is so thick and so tough, so hard. I got a couple that worked out pretty tight, but they're just not straight lines. What I should probably do is refurbish my radial arm saw, that might do it. But yeah, my little chop saw is having a hard time with it. Maybe I'll have to hand fit them some way. I don't know. I made a friggin' mess here though. But it might make a good poker table also. I tried putting a straight edge on them to see if I couldn't, you know, see where the gap was and hand sand, and that's ridiculous. So I'm setting up a jig for the table saw and see if I can't shave it off at 60 degrees. I'll just nail this little 60-degree mitered block with some pins onto my table and see if I can get it to work that way. Yeah, I just made the first cut, but my blade won't go up high enough, so I've got just a 1/16 of an inch, maybe an 1/8 of an inch lip there that I have to hand cut. But this is a wonderful, very sharp saw, just perfect for this application. It seems to be working rather well. You can see I'm just shaving the slightest little bit off. I'm pushing this saw with my hand up against the already perfect edge, and it's following that edge, but I can't do it and film at the same time. Well, it seems that I was 1 degree off and they wouldn't line up, and all my lengths are just about exactly the same. So I planed it down. I'm going to recut the edges again, but I've already done the handsaw twice to get rid of the little lip, and I'm not going to do that again. So I planed them down to get rid of the lip. It's going to be a little thinner, but it'll be lighter for sure. Here's the latest update. I've been massaging these miters all day long, just trying to get them squared away. For whatever reason, you know, I just can't get it right. But anyway, what I did is I mocked up a little template maker here that with 2 holes, and I was able to transfer that onto a piece of 1/16 inch. I've laid out my gears, and I'm going to cut them out of this piece, and it ought to just I can use that to draw the gears onto the wood all the way around, and then I'll bandsaw them. We'll see how that goes. That might be just a little too much work. I don't know yet. Well, I made my template to draw on the table for the gears, the outline of it. It all worked out mathematically. So I cut a little test piece out of one of the drops, one of the little pieces, and made sure that I could cut it on the bandsaw, and that I could sand it, and I could get into every little nook and cranny with my sander, and it worked out well. So I cut my first piece, and that's going to be one big gear, that's for sure. And a lot of sanding is going to be involved here. Days probably. Well, I broke a blade, so I guess that puts a wrap on it for tonight. I got almost through this one, well, not really, and I got these 2 cut. That's gonna look sweet. The table's getting smaller, of course, but it's still a good sized poker table, I think. Hey, finally, I just got the all the bandsaw cutting done. Now I'm gonna do a major cleanup. This place is completely trashed. I just picked up the sheet of 1/4 inch aluminum plate that I'm gonna cut to fit on the bottom of the table where I'm gonna mount the gears. Well, I have 2 dilemmas with my table. The cracking is getting worse, so what I did was I put a little 5-minute epoxy in some cracks on a test piece and then sanded it down, and I think that's going to stabilize them, I hope. So I'll do that. The other thing is I'm getting some slight varying thicknesses. I've got a little ridge here I'll have to sand down, but if it's a flat piece of glass, that might be a problem. So I'll have to deal with that, and I've got this knot hole I'm going to fill with epoxy. The other thing I'm working on is attaching these together, because for whatever reason, I mean, I made a jig on the saw, I tried everything to get perfect cuts, and I'm getting little ridges on here from saw blades, and I don't understand it. Maybe there's some flex in the blade, but anyway, I'll show you how I'm attaching these. Okay, these are ceiling anchors. They're threaded with wood threads on one side and nut threads on the other. And I'm drilling holes in the back side and putting the stud in one side and then the nut on the other. I'm drilling 1.5 inch hole, so I have plenty of room to work in there. And this is the bottom side, so you'll never see it. And I'll show you how I'm lining up these holes so they're near perfect. All right, when I used to build staircases, I made myself a bunch of jigs for all different types. This was a handrail jig. It's kind of stuck. This stuff hasn't been out of here in a long time. But a handrail would go in here. You'd slide the handrail piece in this way, and then this would give me my perfect drill hole size for both holes, so it wouldn't rotate. One got a screw, one got a bolt. And I came across this jig, and this was for newel posts. And so I'm using this jig, and I'll show you how I'm doing that so I get a good alignment. What it's got is a couple of steel inserts in here for drill alignment. So I'm drilling perfectly straight holes, and I'll show you how I'm doing that. Okay, here's the two sections that are going to be joined together. This one already has studs on this side, so this is the one that'll get the back holes on it, and this is the one that'll get the studs on it. I've clamped my piece in place, and I've aligned the inside edge perfectly with the jig edge, and I've got my hole here that I'm going to drill into. There's nowhere for the sawdust in the bit to go, so I have to do it in stages. Sometimes I have to dig the wood out of the bit. Other times I can get it to fall out. It gets packed in pretty tight on the bit. Okay, there's that hole. And I'll just move on to the next one. I just want to show you all a little something about these hanger bolts. When I got them on Amazon, here's the photo. So I figured, well, I don't need 100 of these damn things, but you know, I sure need that bit. And because it was screws and whatnot, I just figured I didn't read the reviews. I really didn't do it. I just added to cart. I'm in a hurry. But right here it says tool not included. So this is kind of being a real pain in the butt for me right now. And I can't seem to find another tool on there. The one that they had that was Amazon Prime that would have come in a reasonable amount of time is back ordered. So I'm kind of stuck. I'm using vice grips, and I'll show you that in a second. I got this really cool pair of vice grips, and I have no idea where I got them from, but I've had them since I was a kid, I think. But here goes. So as you can see, this is a real pain in the butt. It's going to take 2 hands to drive it in. This one's even worse because I have to put the screw at an angle so the vice grip handle clears this bolt. But it's a pain, but I'm getting through it. As you can see, this is clipped on here at an angle so I can clear this one. It's a real pain, and I get a little closer and it starts hitting the other side. I have to bend it around or reposition. But like I said, I'm getting through it. Here, it's hitting now. I have to bend it around a little bit. Anyway, need 2 hands. As you can see, the adjoining piece gets the same exact treatment. I've flipped the piece over, and so now we're looking at the bottom side, and I've transferred a line from the hole up to the bottom of the board, and then I've marked a spot 1.75 inches in. And now what I'm going to do is drill the hole using this 1.5 inch Forstner bit to give myself a hole to stick the nut and my fingers and a wrench in. What I've also done is put a little piece of tape on my bit to give me a depth reference so I don't drill all the way through the top side of the board. So I know when to stop. I can look at it on the side. And come on now. And now I'm going to enlarge the hole to the size of the bolt side of that screw. Just following my original hole. Now I'm just going to clean off the edge of the hole so there's no nubs from drilling on it. So I'm just going to do this by hand real quick with this step bit, which works really well. And that's it pretty much for this portion of it. And it's kind of hard to do with one hand, so I won't be able to push them together to show you, but I'll give you a shot of it here in a second. All right, here's my two pieces, and I'm just going to line up the holes and stick it together. And look at that. Goes right together. Now I'll put some nuts on it and do a test fit. I've test fit the entire project, and most of the gaps are pretty good. You know, they're not perfect, but they're pretty good. This wood is warping on me and cracking on me as I go along, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull it apart and glue it up and get it hardened up a little bit so this stuff stops moving on me. I'm gluing this up in sections of 3, and then I'll join them in the middle. Otherwise there's no way to get it together. And I'm just putting some wood glue on here. I'm using interior, exterior. It's good stuff. I've used this Title Bond 3 Ultimate stuff for a while. Get a good coat on here. And then I'll recoat it. Again, this side's kind of setting up a little bit, soaking in. Whenever you do end grain, gluing into end grain, it tends to soak right into it. So I generally do 2 coats, let it set for a few minutes, and not to where it gets dry, but just to where it has a chance to soak in, and then I get a fresh coat on it. So I'll do the 2 coats, and then I'll stick them together, bolt them, or put the nuts on the threads, and then we'll have what I'm hoping to be a table. I'll show you how I clamp it so I get the top flat. Just to show you one more time, I put a second coat on this side, but you can see how it's just soaking that glue right into the end grain. So that's why I like to do 2 coats. And more glue is better than less glue. That's always been the case, as long as you've got a nice tight clamp and you can squeeze out the excess. I'm using 1/4-inch washers and 1/4-inch nylocks. And as you'll be able to see here shortly, the glue is going to start coming out. This is kind of a tedious process of getting these bolts together, but there it starts coming out, and we'll get this as tight as I can possibly get it. What I've done is clamped a board underneath it, so the face of it, this is upside down right now, so the face of it will be flush. And so I'll just get these good and tight. I go evenly on them, a little here, a little there. Don't want to tighten one down all the way. Kind of like lug nuts, you know, on a vehicle. Anyway, I'll get this with both hands and finish it off. Clean it with a damp rag, get the glue off of it. This is water soluble, so the damp rag will take it off when it's still wet. Clean off the clamps too. I put 5-minute epoxy in all the cracks except for the one that appears to be, I think, still wet, and which is a real drag because I only have one wet one, and so it may shrink at a different rate. You know how wood is. But I'll let this dry overnight, and then I'll sand it down, and then do the flip side tomorrow. The really bad cracks are on the back, So I'm hoping if I use 5-minute epoxy, I can bond the crack and keep it from getting any worse. So that's it for today, I think.